Yo, what is up guys, FaZe here and welcome back to another video. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Today I have something pretty cool to show you guys. I'm going to be doing a tier list. I know a lot of you were wanting me to do a tier list. So yeah, I'm going to be going over basically, I think this is every single tier 10. It might be missing one. I didn't put these here. Obviously I'm using the website tier maker to get all of this set up, but they could be missing a tank. So just let me know if there is one. I'm not really going to deep dive into it, but there should be every single tier 10 vehicle in the game. I'm going to be covering them, why I think they could be either overpowered, which is top of my list, the best there is in the game. And then I have greater than great, which is a tank that if you're not grinding to get this tank or you don't have this tank, you're missing out, is basically the explanation for that tier. And then recommendable is a tank that is neither great nor bad. It's in the middle ground. It's basically a tank that I would recommend to most of you to play, or at least play it once in your lifetime. No basically just means like, yeah, it's kind of lacking. I don't know why you would play it. And then obviously you can kind of figure out what the last one here is. And that is basically the worst tank you could get or play in the current meta. So this is revolving around the current meta. I know it says Wotb Tanks Blitz 11.0, but I'm talking about 11.3 obviously, which is the current updates. So these are the tanks in their current updates and what I think about them. As you can see, it has their different guns and such. So yeah, let's get straight into it. Now, obviously, we're going to start off in order of what the tanks are here. This might be a long video, not too sure, but if it is, so what? Hope you guys will enjoy it. So the 114 SP2, this is actually a vehicle that I really want because I actually don't have this vehicle on my EU account, but my NA account does have it. I have played a few games on it, and I do think it's a really great tank. It's very special in the type of tank it is. It's very similar to those high alpha heavies that you could play, like the E100 and such. So I do like the kind of format that the tank has. It's not a great armored vehicle compared to many other vehicles at tier 10. It's not the most armored tank you can play. Most tier 10s are going to butter straight through it. And for that reason, I don't think it's necessarily a great tank, but I could recommend playing it. But because it's a collector's vehicle and the only time you could ever really play it is if you spend a lot of money to get it, or if you're very lucky to get it in a crate. So for that reason, it being quite rare and hardly anyone having the vehicle to experience it, I won't say that I would recommend going out of your way to get it. So I don't even think I could put it in recommendable, but in this situation, I'm going to say it's recommendable if you get it like miraculously, but I'm not recommending it in a way that you should go out and get it, if that makes sense. So I'm going to put it in recommendable. It's definitely not a great tank. It is lacking in a few things. And then I won't obviously put it in overpowered because it's nowhere near that. And then obviously I won't say no because I do think there is a reason to play it. It's a rare tank. It's special. It's not often seen. And yeah, it has its own, basically its own category, and I do think it's a fun tank to play. Now we have the 116 F3, which I'm going to be completely honest here, I actually haven't played this vehicle at all. But looking at the stats, I don't see why you would want to play it over any other tier 10 medium tank right now. It's one of those vehicles which is pretty mediocre with its kind of stats that it has, and compared to like the CS63 right now, which we'll get into in a shortly, but I don't think it's a fantastic tank. It's not great, nor is it overpowered, but my thoughts on this vehicle might be a bit liquidated here because obviously I haven't played the vehicle, so I can't give you a full review on it or a full maybe thoughts on it because I haven't really had hands-on as playing the vehicle. I've only just looked at its stats and seen how it performs from other players playing it. So I'm gonna put it at. I'll put it at recommendable. Not that I would recommend playing it, but I mean, if you can play it, if you do end up getting it, yeah, why not play it? I would recommend playing it from time to time. Okay, so now we're on the BZ75, probably the most recent tier 10 to be released, if it's not the most recent one. I can't remember now. What tank was released after this vehicle? It was the BZ, which is the latest one. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, BZ was the latest one. I might be mistaken. At least in tech tree wise. So we have the 130mm up first, which is the 460 Alpha gun, I believe. Honestly, if you're going to be try-harding in this vehicle and trying to get good stats, the 130mm is miles ahead of the 152mm, because obviously the BZ's 130mm has premium pen, where the BZ75 has HESH. So you can do a lot more with the BZ75's stock gun. Basically, it is a stock gun. It's the first gun you have on the vehicle. But yeah, I would put this at definitely recommendable. I would recommend playing the BZ75, but I won't say it's great. I won't say it's anything spectacular, because the 460 Alpha gun, while it does have that really good pen, it has good DPM, and obviously the gun depression is pretty decent on the BZ75. Overall, it's a very mobile vehicle as well, so I do think it's very versatile on how you can play it. The armor isn't anything crazy, but it does have a few cheeky angles on it that a lot of bounces can occur because of those angles. So I would say I would put it at a recommendable tank. I would, especially playing the 130mm gun, I would suggest playing the vehicle. It's not like a vehicle I would say, no, don't play it. But yeah, I would definitely put it in that position to recommend you guys playing it if you haven't played it in a while. Maybe try switch to the 130mm if you're currently running the 152mm. And in contrast with the 152mm, I'm going to have to put it in the same place. So the 152mm it's a fun vehicle to play when you play the 152mm, and when you play the 130mm, it's kind of your standard vehicle. It's very similar to all the other Russian counterparts like the IS-7, IS-4 and stuff, with their great mobility and decent alpha, but it's not the most accurate vehicle, and it has decent pens, so that is the nice thing about it, about the 130mm. But the 152mm has HESH, and then obviously normal AP, which doesn't have much pen. And it's kind of in the same category that I listed the Chieftain Mark 6 in my last video, where I don't think having a HESH gun on a tier 10 heavy tank is a great thing, because tier 10 heavies are meant to be able to hold a line, hold a position, and obviously should be able to pen the enemy vehicles in front of them, such as other heavy tanks which have a lot of armor. They should be able to pen it pretty easily. They shouldn't have to struggle penning each other. Where if you play the 152mm, you only have HESH, so you're spamming HESH with a 17-second reload just about. Yeah, you're not going to do a lot of damage. The only time the 152mm is great, I won't even say great, because the pen on the HESH gun is actually garbage. If you compare it to like the Chieftain Mark 6, the pen is garbage. You can't pen a lot of vehicles which you would think you could with HESH. And that's the most annoying thing about this vehicle. I find like a lot of vehicles, even on the rear of some vehicles, obviously you can pen most vehicles on the rear with the BZ's 152mm, but it's not a high HESH gun. Like I believe you can't even pen the Minnow's side of its turret with that HESH gun. There's a lot of angles you cannot pen where a lot of other HESH guns can. So I would put the 152mm as, if you're trying to have a derpy time, if you're trying to have maybe a fun time, not worrying about stats, not worrying about winning games and such, I would say that the 152mm could be recommendable for that. But if you're trying to maybe up your performance, up your game style, I would say run the 130mm. But I'm going to put them in the same position because both are recommendable. I would say if I had to put them in the order, I would probably put the BZ's 130mm above the 114 if we're going to be technical here in the positioning. I would put the BZ 75's 130mm above the 114. And then, yeah, I'd leave the 152mm at the back here for now, just because of that horrible HESH pen. And then also just having HESH gun at tier 10 is not the greatest, especially if you're a heavy tank. Okay, moving on, we have the WZ1115A. This is a Chinese heavy tank, and I'm not the biggest fan of it. I know back in the day, if maybe it's still current, I don't really keep up with Doodles and stuff, but yeah, I'm pretty sure he loves this vehicle. I never really grasped the purpose of playing it, because when he was maybe boasting about it, the IS-7 existed, and the IS-7 has always existed. And the IS-7 is miles better than the WZ1115A. It can do everything the 115A can do, but better. And even in today's time where the IS-7 was nerfed, I would still pick it over the WZ1115A just because of the paper armor that this vehicle has. And then also it having a pretty mediocre gun, very comparable to many other tanks at its tier. It has nothing good going for it, in my opinion, besides maybe some good mobility and such, and really good gun depression. But overall, like, the accuracy is not the greatest out there. The alpha is what you could find on many other vehicles. And obviously the armor is pretty bad. So why would you play this vehicle over many other counterparts? And that's why I would say no to playing this vehicle, especially that it's a collector's tank and you're going to have to mainly spend gold to get it. I would say no. It's not a crap tank. I wouldn't say it's a shit tank. But I would say that, you know what, it's in between these two. I wouldn't say it's a shit tank, and I wouldn't put it at no, don't play it. Like, I would say don't play it, but I would put it in halfway. So it's a pretty bad tank. I'm going to have to keep it in the no, don't play this vehicle. It's not worth spending money on, especially. And yeah, compared to many other vehicles, I wouldn't recommend it at all. Now we're moving on to a pretty good one. WZ113, one of the highest DPM tanks as a heavy tank at tier 10. And this has been a fan favorite for quite a while. And I do think it doesn't get as much attention as it possibly should get. But I feel like it's also been left in the dust compared to all the buffs that's been happening to other vehicles. And while its DPM is still a thing, it still has a pretty bad alpha. And also it does have really good heat pen, which allows you to butter straight through a lot of enemy armors. But you end up doing sub 300 damage per shot. And when you're a heavy tank, you want to take advantage of alpha, because alpha is king as a heavy tank. Because as long as you have really good pen and alpha, you're going to basically knock down the enemy's heavy tank hit point pull a lot quicker when you have decent alpha. And especially, you won't get crucified for using premium rounds. For instance, where if you use a high alpha gun and you use premium shells, you're not really going to be below 300 alpha, where the 113 does get below that. And that's why I would put it at recommendable. I would suggest to play it, but I won't say it's a great tank just because it has that DPM, because it doesn't have the greatest armor out there. The mobility is actually pretty bad. They could have maybe done more with the mobility so it can be a more dominant tank on the medium flank, because if you could use this and get to the medium flank a lot quicker, I would say that it's actually a great tank, because I think the mobility is the only thing keeping this tank where it is, which is, in my case, recommendable to play instead of being great. If the mobility gets a bit of attention and the tank gets a bit more attention overall, and maybe gets a few buffs here and there, I would say it's a great tank. But right now, I would put it above the 114 SP, but I won't put it above the BZ's 130mm, because obviously the BZ still has a great pen. It has more alpha, it has better mobility. And then the armor, I would say, is kind of better on the BZ, because the WZ's 113's armor profile is not the greatest. Can't really side scrape effectively because that upper plate gets in the way. And enemies can just load premium and just go straight to the upper plate, especially if on flat ground. So, and the turret armor can also be penned. But I will say it's not a bad tank at all. That's why I'm putting it above the SP. So it's definitely recommendable, but I personally wouldn't say it's anything great. Now the WZ113 GFT. This thing received a huge nerf in the latest update, but besides it having that huge nerf, I don't think it's a bad tank. I would put this between overpowered and great right now, because the armor, due to that, even though it got nerfed, that PBR graphics that the vehicle received actually improved the armor a bit. So I would definitely put this in between overpowered and great. Greater than great, which is the greatest you can get. Yeah, I would definitely say that this is definitely the top of great right now, if not in between overpowered, because the vehicle still has that great gun. The only thing I do think is letting the tank down compared to last update is its traverse speed. It is extremely slow at turning now, which I do feel it. As a player who did kind of play the vehicle quite a lot, especially in tournaments, compared to what it was in terms of its mobility and traverse speed, it's not the same. But it doesn't mean that it's a bad tank. It still excels in the type of tank it is. If you put this thing hull down, a lot of enemies are still not going to pen you. Like most medium tanks, looking at this vehicle, even on flat ground, even with their premium rounds, they will not butter through that upper plate. So yeah, I would definitely say this is a great tank. Our first great tier tank from the list. And we've gone through quite a bit now. How many are we through right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're on our 7th vehicle, and this is the first great. So yeah, I definitely put this in the great, yeah, in between overpowered and great. It's not quite overpowered. It's not like game breaking, because of that mobility. If the mobility was the same, I'd definitely put this at overpowered. But it's currently high great right now, just before overpowered. Okay, the WZ121. Yeah, this vehicle was pretty strong last update. It is still pretty strong now, but I don't think the tungsten was doing it loads of justice in the last update. It was actually a pretty deadly vehicle, even though it has one of the highest alphas of a medium tank at tier 10. It had pretty good DPM for that. And if you play this in a tune, if you played this with a buddy that was also playing the 121, and you just rushed enemy medium tanks, you were eating them up for breakfast. This tank will literally devour enemies. But nowadays, I don't know. My main gripe about this vehicle since day one is its gun depression. It only has like something like 5 degrees of gun depression, which is just way too little. Like if you really want to take advantage of a tank, you need a good gun, you need gun depression, and I would say DPM. So overall, all you need to make a tank really good is a gun that's very good and some gun depression. It doesn't need to have armor, it needs to have some sort of mobility, but it doesn't need to have all those other stats. It just needs to have a really good gun and some gun depression. Where this vehicle has maybe, yeah, it does have a decent gun. The aiming time is fantastic, one of the best at tier 10 for medium tanks. But I will still put this at a recommendable tank. I won't say that it's a great tank just because of the gun depression. That really annoys me about the vehicle, but I'd say I'd still put this above the, you know what, I'm going to put it before the SP2 and in between the 116F3. Now, like I said, the 116F3 could be pushed up, but I don't know too much about it. It's basically the only tank in this entire list that I'm not too sure about, but I'm going to leave it at this. The 121's just before the 114. I don't think it's the greatest tank out there, but it is recommendable. If you do have it, or if you don't have it, I would still recommend getting it at a certain point because it is pretty fun having that decent alpha with that great accuracy, and the DPM is pretty good. Our next tank in the list is the 121B. Now, this vehicle is a very old vehicle. I believe it's one of the first premium tanks ever, after the M60. It's a very old tank. I had it on my original count like back in 2015, I think 2014. Yeah, but this tank, I've never really spent a lot of time playing it. I don't understand the purpose of it because it's kind of in the mid of being a 1-to-1, but then it doesn't have the great alpha that the 1-to-1 has, and then it also doesn't have that armor profile since the 1-to-1 is a bit lower down. It's really troll on its upper plate. The 1-to-1B just doesn't have that. A lot of tanks are just going to butter straight through it, and its high side means that you do end up getting heshed quite a bunch with that massive side armor, or side plate. And because of that, I would put it at a, you know what, because of the tank because it is a collector's vehicle, I'm actually going to say no to getting it. But I mean, it's not a bad tank, but I'm going to say it's between recommendable and no, just because it's a collector's vehicle, and I wouldn't recommend getting it because you're going to have to pay gold for it. Unless you get it for free, then I would say, yeah, recommended. I'd say definitely try it out every now and then. But compared to what's out there, it's definitely not a great tank. And while it might be a rare vehicle, there's a reason why not a lot of people are playing it. Not just because it's rare, just because it's just mediocre compared to many other tier 10 medium tanks. Our next tank is the WZ1321. Now, this vehicle got a massive buff in the latest updates. It's actually a very fun tank to play. I love that it has great accuracy. I love that it has that great alpha. Not a lot of light tanks have that great alpha. The only tank that really overpowers it is the Sheridan with alpha, but yeah, it's one of the highest alpha light tanks out there, just after the Sheridan. So for that reason, it dumps DPM. The DPM got massively buffed, and it means that you just eat away at enemies. And the fact that it has that adaptive concealment that basically notifies you when you're spotted and when you're unspotted, it's very broken in a way because it allows you to make adjustments in the game a lot easier than a tank that doesn't have it. That 2 seconds or 3 seconds less of being spotted is a big deal, and a lot of people don't realize that. Its strength is not only limited to being a high DPM light tank, but it's also because of that adaptive concealment. And for that reason, I'm going to have to put it at basically overpowered. In the right hands, this vehicle is crazy good. If you play this in a platoon, you're dumping DPM like no tomorrow. And I do think that while it does lack gun depression, it's not the worst tank out there in terms of its gun depression. I know I did boast about saying that maybe a vehicle without gun depression is not great, like I said about the 121, but the WZ-132 has great camo. It can have that adaptive concealment, which keeps you unspotted for a bit less. And for that reason, I do think it's a bit of an overpowered tank, but I will say there is some tanks here that I would put above this in the overpowered list. This is about the bottom of the overpowered tier list here, so I'd say it's just above greater than great. Our next tank is the 60TP, another vehicle that when it was first released, it was absolutely broken. It was one of the strongest tanks in the game. It was used in tournaments thoroughly because of its stats that it had. It's still one of the strongest hull down tanks you can play. Besides a little weak spot on the upper plate, this tank is impenetrable hull down. Doesn't matter what tank you're using. The little hatches on its turret are very hard to hit, and a lot of people do try going for them, and they inevitably miss those shots. So I do think the 60TP is a great vehicle. I'm going to put it straight there. Its mobility is not bad for the amount of armor it has. It's definitely better than a lot of high alpha heavy tanks there are in the game. And for that reason, I will say it's a great vehicle. The only thing I'd say is lacking on the vehicle is that its accuracy is not the greatest. But I mean, it is a high alpha gun. And it's kind of a weird gun because it's not as high as alpha as a lot of other heavy tanks, like maybe the E100 and such. But it is still up there, and I do think it's a great vehicle. If you do have the tank, then congrats to you. If you don't have the tank, I would suggest grinding it eventually because it is a great vehicle. Okay, the Caro 45T. Now this vehicle, I'm not going to put in overpowered obviously, but this vehicle it was kind of a mediocre buff and slash nerf. Its reload time was increased. So interclip reload wise, it has gotten longer, and so its DPM has reduced with that light. And I don't really find the tank to be too fun. I find that last update, I was having a lot more fun in the vehicle. I was racking upwards of 3.5k damage pretty easily with the vehicle. But yeah, nowadays I just feel like it's a lot worse and lackluster compared to what it was. The turret is basically paper. Unless you're fully held down, you're not really going to bounce any shells. I do like the fact that it has gun depression, but it's one of the worst handling guns for a medium tank. I'm not sure if you guys have noticed that. It misses a lot of really easy shots where you're aiming onto somebody and it just goes straight into the ground. Or you're aiming at a certain weak spot and it just goes nowhere near. You even have to like go and watch the replay because you're not sure where the hell that shell went, and you notice that it goes way past where you were aiming. And for that reason, I do find the tank to be very frustrating to play. It's definitely not a great tank, definitely not an overpowered tank, but I would recommend getting it because it's one of the only vehicles with that 4-clip high alpha guns. And I do think it's a fun tank to play. Like that high alpha and the reserve shell is a bit annoying, but if you get the hang of it, it can be pretty fun. So I will say that I would put it below the WZ1. You know what? I'll actually put it above the 121, but I'll definitely not put it above the 114 SP2. Yeah, definitely recommend getting it. But if it's not going for anything lower than 15k, then I wouldn't suggest. 15k gold, I should add. I wouldn't really recommend getting it, but you know what? It's not a bad tank. It's definitely not a no, and it's way further away from no. I would put it definitely in the middle of my recommendable. Oh, now the CS63. Now this vehicle, I'm going to say it straight up, if you're not currently grinding for it, and if you maybe haven't gotten it in current update right now, you're doing yourself a big lose, if I could even say that, because this vehicle is absolutely broken right now. The DPM mixed with the tungsten and everything is just so good about it. The gun is like pincer accurate. It almost feels like the Leopard. I will say that the gun depression is a bit lackluster, not the greatest out there. The mobility is fantastic, so you can zoom around the map. The camera I have found to be very good. Now and then in a bush, like people are right in front of me, I don't get spotted. So, and it's a very fun tank to play because you zoom around the map and you have that pincer gun which can just hit people across the map, no problem. And then mix with the tungsten, if you need to rush and if you need to brawl somebody, loading up that tungsten and adrenaline, you're just going straight through that enemy player's hit point pool. So if you can get to the rear of big heavy tanks, you're farming for days. And I do think this is a broken vehicle. I will put it above the WZ-132. It's definitely a fantastic tank. Would recommend it over any other vehicle right now. But obviously we'll have to see as I go through the list further. Okay, moving on to the Krongwagen. Now this vehicle it hasn't really been nerfed like to oblivion like many other vehicles, but I still feel like it's like one of those tanks that it's only rarely useful in tournaments. If you're not playing it in tournaments, it's kind of a boring tank to play. I hate that the reload has been nerfed because it's very slow now, and I like a gun that keeps shooting. It keeps you in the game, it keeps you focused, keeps you playing basically, where the Krong is just this impenetrable being on a ridgeline, and you just sit there reloading your shells and pressing button to shoot. It's a very boring tank to play, but it's definitely a strong tank. There's no doubt about that. I would definitely say that it's not a great vehicle, but I would put it above the BZ-75. It's definitely the highest on my recommendable list here. Mainly the reason why I'm not putting it at great is just because it's boring. Personal preference, I find this tank to be so unbelievably boring to play because it's quite a slow vehicle. It's reload times are slow. You're sitting most of the game reloading shells, but it's definitely a deadly tank when played correctly, and I would definitely put it at the top of my recommended list. Definitely get this vehicle if you can, because while it isn't the most fun tank to play, it is a very strong tank, but not definitely great or anything. And now we have the Minotauro. Now the armor got absolutely busted. When I first saw the stats for the nerf, I was like, oh, okay, not too bad. The Minnow is pretty broken. Most medium tanks couldn't pen this vehicle at all frontally. But now it's just kind of paper. I don't really understand the nerf. Like, I can understand it to a point. They should have made it that medium tanks compened with normal rounds, but as soon as they switch to premium, they should be able to butter straight through it. But even with your normal rounds, you're going through the Minnow's lower plate now, which is quite annoying. It makes it that I don't find it to be the most fun tank, seeing as it does have 2 hatches on the top of its roof, yeah, and those can be penned pretty easily if you aim it correctly. Even heat shells go straight through it, and that's saying a lot since it is mainly spaced armor. So it is a bit annoying. I will say that it is not a recommendable tank. Right now, the Alpha is very deadly. If you dump the 2 shells, excluding the reserve shell, obviously, you're doing a lot of damage. 1,000 damage in 3.5 seconds or so is a lot of damage, and it's very annoying when I'm playing a light tank or a medium tank and a Minnow pops up in front of me and dumps 1,000 damage into me. It's the most annoying thing. It's just as annoying as a 183 hitting you. Yeah, so Minnow is a very annoying tank, but it's very easy to deal with. If you in a medium tank or light tank, you can easily get to the side of the Minnow, and because its turret can only turn like 27 degrees or something like that, it's a very easy tank to conquer. Especially if you're playing many other vehicles, and for that reason, like, I'll definitely put it at it's not a no for me. I won't say don't get the vehicle, but I'll definitely put it at the least of my recommended. It's just below or just higher than no. Yeah, it's a bit of a hard one, but because it's very annoying because of how good the Alpha is, but it's also not the greatest tank to play out there. Wouldn't say go out your way to go and grind it, especially in this update. Okay, now the Progetto 65, another mediocre vehicle, high amounts of damage potential. It can dump a lot of shells pretty quickly, and it doesn't have a reserve shell like many of the other tanks in its tech tree. So for that reason, I'm not the biggest fan of reserve shells. If you haven't noticed already, all my reserve shell tanks are in the freaking recommendable list. But I will say that it's still going to be a recommended tank. I'm going to put it above the BZ-75's 130mm gun, but I'm not going to put it above the Krong, because I do think the Krong, even though the Krong has that reserve shell, I do think it's a very strong vehicle, where the Progetto 65 I think is pretty balanced in its stats and such, because it doesn't have like impenetrable turret armor like the Krong. It does have pretty decent mobility, but it's actually pretty slow if you kind of compare it to many other vehicles. And I will say that the accuracy is pretty decent, the damage potential is great. But overall, like, the armor is kind of troll on the upper plate now and then. But I won't say that it's a great vehicle. I won't put it even close to great. But I will put that way high up there on my recommendable list. Because it's definitely not a bad tank at all. I do recommend you getting it because it is a pretty fun vehicle to play. Okay, now we're moving on to Reno. The Reno is actually one of my favorite tanks currently. I don't actually play it as much as I probably should, but it's one of those vehicles where it's great, but it's not overpowered. It's one of the most balanced vehicles out there. It's one of the most actually balanced vehicles that Wargaming has released. They've just done a really good job at keeping it good, but not meh, if that makes sense. And the Reno is just pretty deadly. I mean, you can dump a lot of damage really quickly. I like that it's not a reserve type gun. You can comfortably shoot the first shell over and over, and you'll be happy doing that. So, well, I don't know if I could call it the first shell. By first shell, I'm meaning the first shell to be reloaded when the entire clip is depleted, if that makes sense. That is what I'm referring to as the first shell, not the first shell you shoot when the gun is fully loaded. But yeah, great tank. Definitely will put this above the 60 TP, you know. The turret armor is not the greatest in a facehug. You can be penned pretty easily by most vehicles, even medium tanks. But when you put it on a ridgeline, it's basically impenetrable. I do like that the gun goes pretty far up into the turret. So a lot of people end up shooting heat when the turret is looking away from you, from your enemy. And they shoot heat at the gun part that's completely gray. And they wonder why it's getting absorbed. But it's because it's still the gun. And I do like that little tricky part of the vehicle. It does save a lot of shells penetrating you every now and then. But overall, the Reno's mobile tank got decent armor when held down. The gun is very deadly. I will definitely put that high up there on the great. It's definitely a great vehicle right now. Oh god, now we're on the STR VK. You know what? This is going into the shit pile. I'm sorry. The STR VK, when it first came out, deadly vehicle. Loads of DPM. When you rush these things on a medium flank, you are screwing up the entire enemy's medium tanks immediately. Like, it was no hope for playing a medium tank when you had the STR VK. But nowadays, I just think that the bad pen, the low alpha, and the hardly any armor on this tank is just very annoying to play. You could put this on a ridgeline and go fully held down, and you're going to find that, yeah, I'm still getting penned. Why is that? And it's mainly because it has like a tier 8 turret. This tank is getting penned no tomorrow. And I mean, I think if it was really to be great... My damn phone is making a whole lot of noise. That's unfortunate. But the STR VK, definitely a crap tank. Don't get this vehicle. I would say it's not like completely low on the shit pile. I would say it's in between no and shit. But yeah, it's very disappointing. I feel like the vehicle should have like something spectacular about it. The mobility could definitely be revised. And I think the gun also. I think it should have a fantastic gun. Even if they leave the mobility as it is, it should have the best gun out there to compensate for all the other bad things about it, like its armor and such. So yeah, I would definitely put this at the lowest of the lowest here. This is the first crap tank that I would say on the list. Unfortunate, but you know, it is what it is. And the tank costs gold, so yeah, don't spend your money on this vehicle at all. You're going to be very disappointed. Some of you might really enjoy it, but overall, most of you are not going to enjoy the STR VK like myself. Okay, we have the TVP now. Now, this tank used to be the most annoying tank in the game. I'm sure a lot of you are well aware of the double spamming of TVPs in platoons and getting completely eaten for like 3.4k damage by 2 of these TVPs on the enemy team that think they're big giga chads. I was not one of those players, mind you. I did not play the TVP when it was broken. I was one of those guys where I was like, you know what? This tank is so annoying that I'm not going to play it and make other players go through that. And maybe I should have. Maybe that would have helped me with my stats. But yeah, TVP, definitely a recommendable vehicle even now. Even though they nerfed the interclip reload, it is still very strong. It can still dump a lot of shells very, very quickly. But I don't think it's like the greatest tank out there because obviously you still have a very long interclip reload, and if you can't get away easily, you're just going to get obliterated by the enemy medium tanks, especially a lot of them that have been buffed recently. And I feel like it's very crappy armor. Mind you, the turret can be quite troll because it has that big mantlet in the middle. If you don't hit the outer skirts of the turret reliably, you're going to bounce most of your shells, and it's very annoying. But the TVP does have very bad armor on the side even, you'll find that almost any tank you play at tier 10 is going to pen the side of the TVP with HE. So it's just a HE magnet for me. To me, the TVP is a hit point pool that I can just farm. But I won't say that it's bad. I will actually put this above the Caro, but before the SP2. Yeah, I do think that the gun is nicer than the Caro, especially that it's a lot more accurate and you can dump the damage out a lot quicker. Now we have the VZ55. I love this vehicle's arrangements that they've made to the tank wargaming. The tank's gun now is a 2-shot. It's exactly like the PC version, just about. But I really think the VZ55 needed something like that. Although, I also think that it's kind of boring. I think wargaming could have maybe revised something, made something a bit more special, but a lot of vehicles, I don't know if you guys noticed, a lot of vehicles at tier 10 now have a 2-shot autoloader. I'm not sure what wargaming is trying to get at with the autoloader, like the autoloader vibes here. The VZ55 has it, the Foch 155 has it, the Yo has it, and I'm probably missing a tank, but another tank definitely does have it. So it's not a special vehicle with the type of stats it has. It's nothing special. You can get similar playstyle from a lot of others, at least the playstyle from the gun. But another thing that's really good about it is that when you're fully held down, it's a very hard tank to deal with. Mind you, it can be penned on its turrets, but it does have that spaced armor, so if you're playing enemies with heat shells as their premium rounds, you're gonna have happy days, because a lot of times that spaced armor is gonna catch the shells. But any tank using APCR or premium AP like Hori or something, or the Type 71, they're most likely, if you're not moving back and forth, they're gonna go straight to the cheeks of the vehicle. But I will definitely say this is a great tank. I will put this, I'll actually put this, oh yeah, that's another tank that has a 2-shot, is the Reno. So yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of tanks with 2-shot guns, and I feel like that's why I think the tank isn't special, but it is definitely a good tank. I like that it has a very nice alpha, so you can do 1,000 damage, just about. And I would say the Minnow is also a 2-shot gun, because obviously it has 3 shells, but you're only really shooting 2 shots most of the game. So yeah, there's a lot of tanks that have that 2-shot gun playstyle. But I do think the VZ55 is a great vehicle, but I'd put it alongside the Reno, definitely. Now we have the Batchat's 100mm. Now the 100mm in this update is arguably better than the 105mm. I have been having a lot of fun with the 4-shell gun. It's nothing like the TVP's gun. You will find that the TVP's gun does dump out the damage a lot quicker than the Batchat, even if you use the interclip speed reload thing. I forgot what it's called, man. But yeah, the 100mm is definitely great. I do really like it. You can rack up a lot of damage, and if you get to the side of vehicles, like from a far distance, you just dump the whole clip on them with the interclip reload boost. It is definitely a great vehicle. I'll put it up there at greater than great, but it's gonna be at the bottom of the list. I don't think it's what it was previously, because previously I would put overpowered, obviously. It was a great vehicle. But nowadays, I would put it at the... I would put it, especially not the 100mm. Obviously, last update, the 100mm was not even close. It was at recommendable, if that. Not even, it was a no last update. But now, I would definitely put it up there at great. Now we have the 105mm. I feel like this 105mm isn't anywhere close to what it was previously. And for that, knowing what it was, I don't really like to even daddle along with the 3-shot gun. Even though it has that great alpha, you can dump shells obviously quicker, which means you don't have to sit in the enemy fire for longer, as long as the 4-shot at least. But I will say that having the 3-shot kind of makes it a bit unique, because it's not like the TVP in a way. Because the Batchat right now is basically a TVP alternative. It's a light tank version of the TVP with the 4-shot gun. But the 3-shot gun, I would say it's just below. It's a great tank still, but I will put it below the 100mm, and I'd put it quite high on recommendable. I won't put it on recommendable because I do still think the tank is really good, but it's the lowest on my greater than great. Now we have the AMX-30B. This tank was one of the easiest tanks to farm damage in last update, and currently in this update, I just think it's not really, there's no purpose for it. In comparison to the CS63 and a tank like we're going to get into, like the Panzer and the Leopard 1, as well as the E50M, I don't see a point in the 30B. I've never really understood the purpose of the 30B, because you have this huge hatch, which actually was good at baiting shells, but when you had the Leopard 1, what was the point of playing the 30B? in my opinion. Especially when the Leopard 1 had the 9 degrees of gun depression that it used to have instead of what it has now, or 8 degrees, and now it has 7. Can't remember fully, but it's somewhere around there. But yeah, I would say the 30B is recommendable, but it's definitely at the bottom of my recommendable right now because it's a paper vehicle. It does have a pretty nice turret in a way that it's like baits a lot of shells with the hatch, and then obviously the gun mantlet is impenetrable and it catches a lot of shells and obviously bounces them. But I just think that the 30B's greatness of being a very mobile vehicle isn't helpful in the current meta. There's a lot of vehicles that you're going to do just everything better than the 30B is going to do, especially that it's a collector's vehicle now. Well, it's always been a collector's vehicle, but yeah, I definitely put this at the bottom of the list. I would definitely take a TVP over it. I'll take a 121 over it. Even a Caro, I'll put it over it. So yeah, definitely would put the 30B at the bottom. The 50B, strong tank. I mean, it always has been a damage racking vehicle. If you've ever seen a lot of accounts that have really high DPM, most likely than not, one of those vehicles with the highest DPM on their account is going to be the 50B. And it's just because its ability to be very mobile, get to the medium flank, dump the 4 shells that it has, and does upwards of 1,200 damage very comfortably in a clip, and then be able to just run away. And especially when you play it in a platoon, and you just completely dump on the enemy and just clear a tank immediately, especially if they're a medium tank, I just don't think it's the greatest tank out there because it is a hit point bag. If you're in most situations where you want to go maybe held down to get quick sneaky shots on it, it's a very huge tank. It's going to be a pen magnet for most vehicles, and if you get YOLO'd by a lot of medium tanks that have pretty decent alpha, and not alpha but necessarily, but good DPM, they're just going to farm you completely. Like, yes, you might put 1,200 into them, but they're just going to sit in front of you, farm you until you're dead before you can even reload the clip again. And for that reason, I will say it's a great tank, but I'm going to put it below the bat chat because while I do think the 50B having reactive armor is a pretty cool thing, a lot of vehicles in current updates have HESH, premium HESH. And if you don't know, premium HESH negates reactive armor. If you load reactive armor in a game, HESH is still going to do its maximum value regardless of you having reactive armor. So you're not going to get that 20% decrease in enemy shells if they're using HESH and HE. And for that reason, I feel like it's kind of being nerfed by the vehicles that have been buffed in the current update, because a lot of vehicles have HESH guns now and have a pretty decent, like Chieftain Mark 6. If you spam that against 50Bs, it's Chieftain Mark 6 every day, all day, because that HESH can just go straight through even the frontal turrets. So yeah, the reactive armor is not really doing it justice in terms of the current update, but I do think it is a great tank for the potential that it has to do a lot of damage. Now we have the Foch 155's 155mm. Now, I'd say both are 155mm. I don't know which one is the 2-shot gun now. It's probably the SA58 Mod 2, if I had to guess. Yeah, I haven't really looked at the exact name of it because they're both 155mm, but I'm just going to take this one here with the SA58 as the I should say the Mod 2 is the 2-shot gun. The 2-shot gun is arguably the worst gun on the vehicle. A lot of people are going to argue with me and say, no, it's the best gun that the vehicle has and it makes it gun, or the tank it is. Yeah, I'm not going to agree with you. The gun is so incredibly unreliable, and for a vehicle that needs to be reliable, because obviously a lot of other things on the vehicle are not great, like many of you know, it doesn't have the armor like the WZ113 has, for instance. It doesn't have the great accuracy of a Groll, for instance. And it also doesn't have any gun depression. Its mobility can't be compared to a lot of other vehicles. And for that reason, while it does have a great choice to choose between super speed boost or tungsten, I do still find that it's a fun tank, but obviously it's still that same mediocre 2-shot type of playstyle, which a lot of vehicles have. I will say that it is I'm going to put it at recommendable. I'm going to recommend it over the BZ, but not over the Peugeot 65 and the Krong. A lot of people are going to argue with me about that, but I just feel like the gun misses a lot of easy shots that you just sit there and wonder what the hell just happened. But yeah, Foch 155's 2-shot gun. Definitely recommend getting the vehicle. Definitely recommend using the 2-shot gun from time to time, but I don't think it's great for that reason. Now the single shot gun I'm going to immediately put in great, because this is the gun that I think the tank deserves. It's not like the gun that it used to have, where it had the 2-shot high alpha gun, but this gun is actually reliable. It hits its shells very easily. I like to personally run it without the reload. I mean, damn, what am I saying? Without the super speed boost, and I like to run adrenaline and tungsten together, so you can just get that optimal DPM potential. And for that reason, that it's just a very reliable gun. The armor being buffed means that you can now use the armor in a certain way to actually bounce shells. It's not just absorbing shells completely, but it also isn't impenetrable. A lot of tanks, if they just switch to premium, are going to butter straight through the frontal plate. So the only reason why I'm putting it at great is because it works as a very good sniper vehicle if you use the single shot, because it's very accurate. And it has really good velocity, so you can hit tanks across the map pretty reliably. But I won't put it higher than it is now, above the 50B and such, because the main thing is just because of its... I don't like that it's such a easy tank to deal with now and then. I don't like that the tracks are so out of there. You can easily go straight through the tracks, no problem. And if you're playing in a medium tank that has DPM, while this Foch 155 has crazy DPM as a tank destroyer, it's nothing like the Groll. It's nothing like the Hori. I don't think it has that Hori potential gun, and it's why I'm going to put it at the lowest of a great tank. The next tank we have the AMX M4. This tank was buffed in the latest update pretty well, a pretty good buff. It's really good in tournaments right now. I hate that it's in tournaments because we've already done that wargaming. We've done the AMX era. Why are you bringing it back? Maybe switch things up, choose a different tank to be meta, please. I think the tournament community can agree with me. Let me know in the comment section if I have some of the tournament buddies still watching here. But yeah, the AMX M4, very strong tank. I will say it is the highest on my recommendable. Now, a lot of people are going to argue with me, say it's a great tank, it's if not overpowered, but I'm definitely not putting it at overpowered for me, personally. But I will say it's the highest of the highest of recommendable. I definitely suggest you to get the tank if you can, because if you're maybe a new player to tournaments, it is going to start your tournament career pretty well, especially in this season. Yes, things can change in a year's time. The meta can change, tanks get nerfed, tanks get buffed, and it may fall out of that meta like it did previously. But regardless of that, I do think it's a great idea to get the tank because it is strong. It has one of the best turrets in the game. If you don't take the hatch into consideration, because that hatch is absolutely huge. But if you properly use the gun oppression, it is impenetrable. It's the hardest tank to pin in the game, hull down, if it's only showing its turret. But I don't think it's a great tank, mainly because of the mobility. I feel like the traverse speed should be better. I feel like this tank turns like a boat on land. If the traverse speed was better, yes, the turret turns very quick. It's one of the fastest turret turning tanks in heavies. But I feel like the mobility could be better, because obviously while it did get an upper plate buff, it still has those weak spots on the side that are pennable by even light tanks very easily. But yeah, the mobility could get a buff, but maybe keep the upper plates pretty weak and increase the mobility. I feel like that would give it more uniqueness than just being this very armored frontal plate heavy that's incredibly slow and doesn't have the greatest gun out there. Okay, now moving on to the 12.8 centimeter E100 gun. This gun got absolutely busted in the current updates. You know what? As someone who really recommended the E100 back in the day, and by back in the day I mean about a year ago, when it was just really fun tank to play the 600 Alpha or 640 Alpha gun, and then Wargaming changed it to obviously a 670, 680 Alpha gun, and that kind of ruined it for me. I stopped playing the E100 then. But I do think that, yeah, like, obviously Wargaming ruined this vehicle. I don't know if a lot of you will feel that same way about the vehicle as I do. I do think that the tank's been ruined. I love the fact that it was a pretty try-hard tank. You had to have a pretty good skill set and a good knowledge on how to play the vehicle in order to use it about a year ago, when you had to angle the turret a certain way to get good bounces, and it has a lot of hit points. It has very good armor if you think about it. Side scraping, you're not really penning this vehicle at all if you angle the turret obviously correctly. But in today's meta, where a lot of vehicles have really good pen, the E100 is just a butter pinata. If you go really hull down, it is basically impenetrable, especially to medium tanks. No one's penning it, but anyone else, any heavies with high alpha or high pen, and any tank destroyers are just going straight through this tank. It's literally just a HP farm pool for most vehicles. But I will say that the 12 centimeter gun is better than the... I won't say it's better than the Krong, if I'm going to be honest. I'm going to put it just below the Foch. Because while I do think the DPM is crazy good, I just don't think that's what the E100 is. And I'm mainly putting it at this low on the recommended list just because I feel like the tank is very boring compared to what it used to be. I feel like Wargaming pulled and ripped the fun out of this vehicle. The 15 centimeter, the 600 alpha gun, basically the 640 alpha gun, I'm going to put it at the bottom of recommended. I mean, it's nothing like it used to be. It's kind of just like if you play it, you're just going to wish you had the same gun back a year ago or so. So yeah, I'm definitely going to put it at the bottom of the recommended. I would say it's lower than the 30. You know what? I'll put it above the 30B for some of you who love the E100 still to this day. But I don't think it's the greatest tank out there. I do think that the 640 alpha gun is not needed in its current stats that it has. But yeah, the 12.8 centimeters miles ahead of it in this current update. Now we're moving on to one of the most broken vehicles in the game right now. It's the E50M. And it's mainly not because of its turret armor buff, but mainly because of its reactive armor. This tank is basically a very souped up heavy tank. Despite not having HP of a heavy tank, its potential to bully other medium tanks has always been the same. It has always been that tank. If you want to bully a medium tank, you take the E50M because it's going to bully even most heavy tanks, like no problem. But I do find that this vehicle's gun could be a bit better, but it is one of the most accurate guns out there, so I'm not going to complain too much about it. But overall, the gun's not like anything comparable to like the Leopard 1 or something like that, or the CS63, but it's definitely an overpowered tank. I would put this above the WZ132, even though all the great things that the 132 has. I'm going to put it above there, if not in front of the CS63, but I still think for my playstyle, the armor is not necessary when you have such a good gun on the CS63. I'll put the E50M just before the CS63. Now we have the grill, which got a massive buff in terms of its gun. And also, well, I wouldn't say it's massive, it just got a bit of a DPM buff. And then also its mobility has been improved, which is a big issue with the vehicle. Since back 2015, it's always been not as fast as its brother at the Waffle Tractor at tier 9. I always thought that the Waffle Tractor was a better grill. I'm not sure if some of you would agree with me on that. The Waffle Tractor was always the better grill in my opinion because it was more mobile. It had it still does have crazy camera rating, so where the grill gets spotted very easily. I'm not sure how that makes sense. If anything, the Waffle Tractor should have worse camera rating and the grill should have one of the best at tier 10 for a tank destroyer, but it just doesn't. But I will say that this is a great tank. I'll put it at the you know what, I'll put it above. I'm definitely going to put it above the 3-shot Batchat. You know what, actually no, this is a very great tank now that I think about it. I'm going to put it above the 60 TP because the DPM is just bonkers. You completely dump damage. If you're sitting at the back of the map using the reticle calibration that it has, you're pincering all the enemies, and if you get on dead rail, you're having a blast of a time. You're hitting all your shots, you're doing a lot of damage, you're soaking up the enemy's hit points, and you're just, yeah, grill is very fun to play. Even though it's not an autoloader, I know, like for me personally, autoloaders are the funnest tanks you can play most of the time. But the grill is not an autoloader, and it is still the funnest tank I can play. The gun is just absolutely amazing. Okay, we now have the Panzer, another German tank destroyer. Now, the issue with the Panzer, it's always been this tank that I never really enjoyed playing. It's a mix. It's basically the German 183. While you don't, oh gosh, what did I do? While you don't have Hesh, you do have decent HE, where you can pen vehicles on their sides and mainly on their rears with HE and do upwards of like 1,200 damage, which is crazy. So that's why I would say it's definitely a 183 alternative, and probably a better way better than a 183 to be honest. It's a much more usable tank in most scenarios, but it's just a slow, massive tank. And against tanks like the Hori, where it just farms this vehicle, like its armor is not even existent, it might as well just be a paper vehicle. Yeah, I don't think I would put the actually, you know what, I just noticed. I don't think the Waffle Tractor E100 is here. Yeah, it's not. Well, I'll see if I can just add a new image to compensate for that. I just noticed that. I know in the beginning I said there's probably a tank missing here because it's from 11.0 update and not 11.63, and that was the tank that was on my mind that was missing. But anyways, back to the Panzer E100. I'm going to put this at a recommended tank, but I'm going to put it like very low on the list, mainly because of its very boring playstyle. You're very slow and you're basically a pinata. A lot of enemies are going to, especially medium tanks that can get a hold of you, get around you. It's very slow. It's annoying sometimes because of how slow it is, but it can definitely do good. And its armor isn't maybe spectacular, but you do find it bounces a lot of shells now and then, especially when you use the completely use the gun depression and such, which it doesn't really have. But yeah, I'd put it above the Foch two shotgun. You know what? Actually, no. I'm gonna put the Foch above it. I know a lot of people are gonna be really upset if I put the Panzer above the Fox 2 shotgun. So I'm definitely gonna put it above the E100 because I feel like if you play it as a heavy tank, it still can do really well. But I think the hit point reduction was a bit annoying. They shouldn't have touched the hit points on this vehicle because it was this big German tank destroyer. It should have hit points for the size of it that it is. So yeah, I don't know why Wargaming did that, to be honest. But now we have the Panzer 50 ton. Now this vehicle I've never really enjoyed, mainly because the gun is a lot like the Caro. It's very unreliable now and then. But we can't argue that this is, especially in the last updates, this was the most annoying tank to be rushed by because everyone was spamming these. At least 2 of these. I would say that this was the new version of the TVP. People YOLOing you in Panzer 50 tons, ramming into you, and then obviously using their tungsten and adrenaline to just dump out like 4k damage per minute on you, and mixed with another guy at 8,000 damage per minute. Yeah, you're not having a good time. But yeah, the Panzer 50 ton, very great tank. Besides the gun being a bit unreliable from time to time, I do think that it's a very unique tank in a way. It's very similar to the E50M, but I will say that it is at a bottom of my grade. Mainly because I don't like the gun too much in terms of its accuracy, but it's no doubt that this tank can be a very deadly tank to play, but I don't think the gun is as reliable as a lot of other vehicles, and for that reason I'm going to put it at the bottom of my grade. Still a very great vehicle, just not greater than the other tanks. And you know what, actually I'm going to put it above the 50B. Yeah, that's where I'll keep it at for now. Now we have the Leopard 1. Overpowered immediately. This tank has always been overpowered to me, in a way, but to the average player, to most players who are playing this game, the Leopard 1 is a no for me, because it's a very hard tank to take really full capabilities of the vehicle, because it has no armor, it has a pretty crappy camera rating, so you're getting spotted quite a lot. It's a very big tank. It absorbs Hesh like no tomorrow, but the gun is so good. So where a lot of new players struggle to really aim at weak spots and know where to go to maybe farm out an enemy's vehicle and put distance between you and the enemy so you can farm them while they push you, for instance, it takes a lot of skill to really master the Leopard 1, and that's why for most players, for the average Joe, I'm going to put it at a no. It's bottom of no. Don't get this tank. But if you are a player who is experienced, can take advantage of the tank's capabilities, such as that great gun, and now it having active concealment or whatever it's called, getting unspotted more sooner is a nice thing, because you can run away from engagements a lot sooner than you probably could, well, you probably would in the previous update. So I'm definitely going to keep it at overpowered. I'm definitely going to leave it there, but it's going to be at the bottom of the list. I don't think it's better than the CS63 in most engagements, but I do think it's still one of the greatest tanks out there, especially because of that gun that it has. Now we have the mouse. The mouse, you know what? I loved when the meta consisted of mouses. I think that was such a good mouse or strategy where you would learn, like I was back in the day, I would learn how to master playing the mouse, because it was really one of those awarding vehicles. If you knew how to angle it and you knew how to properly adjust the vehicle against your enemies, you were bouncing so many shells, especially in meta when you would spam like 4 of these, 3 of these. It was a very fun meta to me, because the the journey of learning how to master the vehicle by angling it was one of the funnest things you could do. I remember going in training rooms and 1v1ing my teammates, which were in my same team, for tournaments, and just trying to master the mouse. And then when you finally get to mastering how to angle it and stuff, it was very rewarding. Where I think now, like, its armor should just be way better than it is. A lot of vehicles with their premium are going straight through the upper plate for no reason. It shouldn't even be that case. Like tanks like the Hori from across the map on flat ground, even if the mouse is angling, are going to go straight through that upper plate, and it really shouldn't be like that. Why, Wargaming? Why is this the mouse, the tank that arguably made the game famous, drawed a lot of players to playing the game? Why is this tank so absolutely paper? You have so many vehicles that have so much pen, and you've given the mouse all this size and girth and potentially armor. If you look at the stats, the armor looks great, but the angles that this tank has is it doesn't have angles, and so the armor basically means nothing. But yeah, I would definitely put this at recommended to play because of the type of tank it is, but I'm gonna put it below. I'm gonna put it above the Caro. You know what? No, I'm not putting it above the Caro. I'm gonna put it below the E100. Mainly because it doesn't have anything crazy going for it. The tank gets penned like no tomorrow. It's basically a hit point magnet. For tournaments, it is still used. I might add, I didn't really say that. In tournaments, it is still being used because of its hit point pool. But I feel like the armor should be way better than it is. It should still have that same feeling of learning how to angle it correctly. Because nowadays, like, yes, it was buffed. The lower plate, so you can't just get pinned through the side of the track into the hull. I just think it needs a lot. Like, the upper plate should be impenetrable. It should not be able to be pinned on the upper plate by any tank. The turret can stay the same. I think that the cheeks are fine because if you angle the vehicle, it is still pretty strong, especially its turret. But I don't think that the upper plate should not be able to be pinned. It should be the lower plate and the turret, and that is it. Yeah. I don't think Wargaming is going to take my word for it because obviously I'm just phased, man. But yeah, that would be the approach. If this tank's upper plate was impenetrable, it's borderline great. And maybe like the gun being a bit revised a bit as well. But in its current state, I'm going to put it below the E100's 640 Alpha or whatever Alpha it is nowadays. I didn't really look into it too much because I don't really care about the E100 as much. But I'm going to put it below the E100. The VK72, one of the greatest looking vehicles in current updates because of that PBR graphics that it got, but it kind of lost a lot of armor for no reason, unfortunately. I do like the adjustments that Wargaming made in the previous updates where they gave it mobility. Like the same thing that the K91 was famous for. I think, what was it called? Improved suspension or something? Man, it's very late at night, so forgive me here, guys. I'm not remembering all the words and stuff and terms. But it's definitely not as great as it used to be. But I'm definitely going to say it's recommended because it's definitely not a bad tank. I like the Alpha. I like that the tank is the type of tank it is, where it's not a side-scraping tank like every other tank is nowadays. And it does have that capability to still do well. But I'm going to put it... You know what, I'm going to put it with the other two Germans, just above the 640, also the 600 Alpha E100 gun. I'm going to put it just above it, but it's definitely not better than something like the BZ75's Hesh gun, even. You know what, actually, I think I need to do something with this Hesh gun of the BZ. For the gun alone, it's probably like between mouse. Yeah, I made that adjustment to the BZ75. We now have the VK90, very great tank, but it's not overpowered at all, because obviously its turret is actually... A lot of people think the turret is this impenetrable thing. It's arguably the best side scraper tank in the game. It's like the old IS-4 back in the day, but if not better. But I don't like that the turret is very paper. It should be paper because obviously this vehicle hull down using that like 8 degrees of gun depression over the side. It is very deadly and very annoying to deal with, but when a lot of vehicles have high AP pen like the K91 and the S-Conk and the Hori doesn't even need to blink an eye to most vehicles, but the VK90's turret, I mean, it just looks at it. You can go through the gun. Like if you shoot straight through to the gun, it's going to go straight through and do damage. You have the cheeks on either side, which are absolutely great to most vehicles as well. In a face hug, it is very strong. because the tank does have a pretty good premium APCR pen, and you can just butter thread your enemies. But the upper plate is a lot like the mouse, nothing as weak as the mouse, where you can in a face hug. A lot of tanks that have gun depression are going to pen your upper plate, no problem. But for that reason, I do think it's a great tank. I'm going to put it way up here. I'm going to put it next to the AMX M4. I don't think it's a great tank, and I don't think it's a bad tank. So I'm going to put it way up there, if not in front of the AMX M4. These two are basically together, in my opinion. Great tank, but definitely not. I'm saying it's great, but I'm not saying I'm not going to put it in my great list. But yeah, Hori, overpowered, man. I don't even need to say much. I mean, I've been boasting about the tank like throughout the video. It's an overpowered tank for sure, and mainly it's because of its fantastic gun. I mean, that's really all it has. It did get reactive armor, but I don't understand the worth of it, to be honest. But I mean, it does help now and then. But overall, the Hori's gun is the most deadly gun in the game. It's definitely, I'd put this above Hori. I mean, yeah, I'd put this above E50M for sure. Won't put it above CS. And you know what? Actually, I'll put it in the same position as CS. If I could put these in the same position, I would. The Hori's gun is so deadly. You have so much DPM. You can run adrenaline on it, having upwards of like 4.2k DPM or something like that. And then also having that premium AP with that much, I think it's like, what is it? Oh, close to 400 premium AP pen, which equates to actually like close to like 450 millimeters effective pen. Yeah, it's just no tank has armor in the light of the Hori. And it's one of the easiest tanks to just point and shoot because it's very accurate. One of the most accurate TD guns in the game besides the Groll. And then also that ability to just pen any vehicle without even caring. Like the E50M has no armor. Like if you look at the E50M using a Hori, the whole upper plate, everything at any angle, it's penning it like no problem. I just moved the Panzer by accident, bro. No. Where was this? Where was this Panzer? I think it was above. Did I put it above? I think I put it above the one shot gun. I think no, above the. I don't know where I put it, guys. Forgive me on that. Somewhere there. Okay, now we have the SDB. Now this was one of the most broken vehicles, like for a very long time, like 3 years, even more than that. It having premium AP even made it like even more of a great tank because it penned everything with ease. And like if you saw a mouse, you were so happy using that premium AP and just going straight through like the upper plates and everything on the mouse. It was so nice. And arguably the SDB was one of those vehicles that against any tank in a 1v1, the SDB is coming on top. Where nowadays, it's a very bad tank, if I'm going to be completely honest. I'm going to put it above the AMX30B. I don't really... You know what? I'm not going to put it above the AMX30B because I still think the SDB is way better than the mouse. BZ's Hesh gun and E100 and stuff. So I'm going to put it up where... I'm going to put it above... I'm going to put it above the SDB. Mainly... I mean, sorry, SDB. I'm going to put it above the TVP. The SDB, why I'm going to still put it there is because 11 degrees of gun depression is still useful, despite its gun being not as great as it once was, and the DPM one of the lowest of the tier 10 medium tanks. But I think that 11 degrees of gun depression is still very useful. If you do find yourself on a really good ridgeline at the end of a game, you're going to be kind of happier in the SDB, but then again, it's not anything clear to anything else I've put on the list here. Oh, now we have the Type 71. Now, if you watched my video before this video, where I spoke about the best heavy tanks, my top 3 heavy tanks in the game, my Type 71 was my second choice. A spoiler alert for those who haven't watched the video, which were planning on doing so. The Type 71 was my second choice, and it's for a great reason. This tank, while it's not as OP as it once was, with that great held turn rates and such that made it so brokenly troll, I think that that premium AP is so nice. I think it has like 352 millimeters of premium AP, which is bonkers, man. That's like 400 millimeters of pen. And having premium AP is so useful, especially when tanks like the S-Conk exist, where you can, and the VZ55, where having AP and APCR is so useful to go through their space armor. And APCR, premium AP is one of the most reliable rounds in the game. If you want to make sure that you're killing a target, you want to hope that you're not having heat, because obviously heat can get absorbed by guns, it can get absorbed by any spaced armor, tracks and such, where a premium AP can't really be caught by anything. it's most likely than not, if it has a high amount of pen on it, it's going to go straight through. So Type 71, I'm going to put it as a great tank. I'm going to put it above the 60. You know what? This was my second greatest tank. I'm going to put it all the way up here. I don't think it's better than WZ because, actually, you know what? Type 71's going great of great, man. It's not overpowered at all. Like you can see, I don't have any heavy tanks up here. But for now, Type 71 is my greatest tier 10 heavy tank. While I do think the Reno is arguably better in a lot of scenarios, and I would honestly put the Reno above the Type 71 here. Let me adjust the WZ. I don't think the WZ's better than the VZ. But yeah, actually no, I'm gonna leave it here. Sorry guys, I'm revising things as I go, but I shouldn't really be doing that. But Type 71 is going to be my greatest, and it's going to be Reno, the WZ, VZ, and then so on. Now we have the Chieftain Mark 6. Now I did mention in the beginning of the video that I don't like tier 10 heavy tanks that have Hesh guns. As you can see here, I put my Hesh gun on the BZ way down there, and it's because it's such an unreliable thing for a tank to have. A heavy tank should not have, especially a tier 10, should not have premium Hesh. It should have a really high, maybe like the Chieftain Mark 6 was better off having a high explosive pen, but it shouldn't have had the 210 or whatever be replaced. Like the Hesh gun shouldn't have replaced the APCR gun that it had for premium AP. But I still think it's a great tank because it combats the current meta of reactive armor. A lot of vehicles have reactive armor. The AMX M4 has it, the Hurry has it, E50M has it. A lot of tanks have reactive armor nowadays, and Hesh, like I said, negates reactive armor. So it's a very useful tank in current updates because you can take advantage of that premium Hesh to negate reactive armor. But I don't think it's really the best thing Wargaming could have done. I feel like they could have made the last shell in the round, like its normal high explosive that it's always had. Maybe that could have been buffed a bit better with its high explosive. Maybe make it close to 200 mils of pen, instead of its 250 or so mils that it has now, and then kept that premium APCR. I am going to put this high up on my list though. I'm going to put it above the 60 TP because of the type of gun it has. The gun has always been very reliable, but I don't think it needed the Hesh. This was my third option in my greatest heavy tanks, so I think putting it here is a bit rough since I do have two other heavy tanks above it. But I will say that I would put this, wait, this is going above the grill. I will say that the Chieftain Mark 6 is up there and is tied with the VZ55. If I had to make an adjustment to my best heavy tank video, I would swap the Chieftain Mark 6 for the Reno. Yeah, that is one tank I would replace for the Chieftain because the Reno has the premium AP. It is more reliable in most scenarios, but I like the Chieftain's compatibility against reactive armor. That's my only just to putting it so high. Actually, let me just point this out. If it was last update where it was the gun that it used to have, it would be like up here with the Type 71 for me. But yeah, in current update, it's done here. Now we have the 183 shit tank. Do I need to really speak about it? I mean, like, I have like something like 3.4k, 3.5k average damage in the tank, something like that. It is a tank that you can easily do high damage in, but it's not a win rate tank because all it is a very troll tank. If you're trying to have a fun time, I guess, ruining people's days, you're going to do that in a 183 for sure. But it's not a winning tank. It's not a fulfilling tank. It's not a tank that you're really going to play hours on end if you're trying to win and trying to actually, I don't know, enjoy yourself, because a lot of times the gun's not going to go, your shells are not going to go where they need to go. It's also annoying that you have the Hesh now and then, because obviously while the normal AP rounds in this tank have really high pen, which I think tanks that have premium Hesh should have high normal rounds. But yeah, the 183 is just a shit tank, guys. I'm going to put it above the SDR-VK just because it's very easy to do a lot of damage. Like your average damage is going to go up if you have this tank, because you just need to shoot 3 shells and there we go, 3,000 damage, woohoo. But it's not a great tank. It's a shit tank, to be honest. I'm going to put it up where they have, like, I'm not going to say no, don't get it. I'm putting it in the shit pile because I do think you should get it. It is recommendable in a way, but it is a crap tank. Yeah, it's just a pinata that misses most of its shells and can ruin people's days. Now the FV215B, arguably what the Chieftain Mark 6 should have been in terms of its gun. If I could choose to switch the gun on the Chieftain Mark 6 for the FV215B gun, I would do it in a heartbeat. But overall, the FV215B's like armor and all the other stats that the tank has can't compare to the Chieftain Mark 6. Like, while the Chieftain Mark 6 has no armor, I feel like the gun depression that the Chieftain Mark 6 has is so much more useful than the FV215B's gun depression. While the armor is better on the 215B, the gun depression is a lackluster thing on the 215B. But I do think it's a pretty recommendable tank. I will put it between the VK90 and the AMX M4. But I'm going to put it below the VK90 just because I think the VK90 is more useful in a lot of more situations. Because I feel like the FV215B is just this massive tank that, while it has great DPM, you have pretty good high explosive pen. And you still have the APCR. Like I said, the gun is fantastic on the tank, but everything else about it kind of brings it down. And for that reason, I'm going to put it recommendable. Not to the average Joe, not to every player, because like I said, the tank has no gun depression. It's this massive tank. While it can side scrape pretty well now and then, it's a very easy tank to combat, and compared to a lot of heavy tanks, it isn't really fulfilling compared to a lot of other tanks you can play. Now the Badger got completely ruined in my opinion. This was one of my most played tanks at a certain stage because it was so fun to have this armor that was so impenetrable. Before they nerfed the armor, like, no tank could pen it. It doesn't matter if you were in a Ho-Re, you would have to pen like the little weak spot of the nipple on the tank to even consider penning it. But now it's just this easy to pen tank. Like, even if it's fully held down, the Ho-Re is going straight through it. And then it having heat rounds as its premium is so bad. And then also like it should just be this crazy DPM tank. Maybe leave the armor as it is now. I feel like it is a good thing that it isn't as broken as it was. But it shouldn't have heat as its premium rounds. Heat is so unreliable, and for a tank that is pretty slow at traverse speed and such, like, it was pretty quick, but I feel like accuracy wise, great. Heat round, no, should not have it. And it's why I would put it up there with the 30B. I wouldn't say it's something you have to get and have to play, because it's just not a great tank anymore. While it does have pretty decent like stats in certain engagements, I wouldn't put it higher than the mouse, and that is saying a lot. I would put it above the 30. You know what? Below the 30B. Okay, now we're moving on to the FE4005. We're on the British vehicles now. Oh wait, we were on the British vehicle with the Badger, but yeah, FE4005. Great gun. I think the gun is very deadly. It's very annoying. It's the TVP version of it for the tank destroyers. But I don't like that it's this massive barn house. And there's a reason why its legendary camo is a barn. Because it's the size of a barn. It's this massive tank that gets spotted very easily. You can't really hide behind many ops like covers and stuff because you're just so big. And every tank is going to HE you. While you do have spall liners to negate HE, I really just don't like everything else about it besides its gun. It can be very deadly when loading your clip reload boost, whatever it's called, and then just dumping, like, what is it, 1,500 damage very quickly, and then using super speed boost to just get the hell out of there. But I don't think it's a great vehicle because in most scenarios you're just going to get farmed and you're not really going to have time to do a lot. But every now and then you do get really good games that you just completely dump damage and you do upwards of like 8k damage easily. So I will say that it isn't a recommended tank to play. I wouldn't recommend anyone that's new, even a reasonable good player, to grind the FE4005 because it's just lackluster. Everything besides the gun is pretty shit. But I will say that I would put this above the SDB. You know what? I'm going to put the TVP above the SDB, as well as the Caro, and as well as the 121. And then I'll leave it like that for now. But I'm definitely going to put the FE4005 before the 114 SP2 because of its massive size and most of the time unreliability because of that armor. And now we have the FE4202. This is arguably one of my favorite medium tanks in the game to play, mainly because of its Hesh gun, and a lot of people don't like it. I think, is the Royal Order gun the heat gun, or is it the L7B? I think the L7B is the Hesh gun, and the Royal Order is the heat gun, but I might be wrong. But I'm just gonna say that the L7B is the Hesh gun. So in regards to the Hesh gun, I do think this tank is a great vehicle. I'm gonna put it upwards, like higher than the Companzer 50 ton, higher than the Batchat, and I think I will put it. I'll put it above the grill, definitely. While the grill has a great the gun, I mean everything else is not as great, but the FE4202 Hesh gun is one of the most deadly guns in the game, and possibly one of the most like unregarded tanks. Everyone thinks, oh, FE4202, it got the buffs that it shouldn't have gotten, and the nerfs that it shouldn't have gotten, and I totally agree in some aspects. This tank should have never gotten the armor on the turret for with regards to replacing the accuracy and the gun handling of the tank. The tank should be this accurate vehicle with no armor, in my opinion. So you can fully use that Hesh capabilities, because Hesh is a very unreliable shell, and also the most reliable shell you can have, because it does so much damage. Most deadly shell, I shouldn't say reliable. It's the most unreliable gun, but most deadly gun. And for that reason, I love playing the tank. I love racking up damage so easily with the tank, just spamming people with Hesh, especially enemy medium tanks like the CS63, no armor to Hesh. For the FE4202, you can even pen the Hori with Hesh frontally, the E50M, the WZ, obviously Leopard 1. I believe you can even pen the Type 71's hatch, but I think it has space armor, so it might not be as reliable. But 202, FE4202, I even say it's better than the Chieftain, to be honest. The Hesh gun, having it on a medium tank is a lot better than having it on a heavy tank, because you're more versatile as a medium tank. And then also, obviously, the gun depression and that troll armor on the turret every now and then, getting crazy bounces from like 183s is crazy, man. But yeah, I love the FE202. I know a lot of really good players are not even going to agree with me. But I love the FE202. It's one of my favorite tier 10 medium tanks. Now we have the heat gun. Obviously, this is a no for me. Why would you play the FE4202 with the heat gun? It makes no sense whatsoever. The whole thing that gives the FE4202 purpose is having a Hesh gun. No other medium tank has the same Hesh gun as the 4202. And for that reason, why would you use the heat gun? It makes no sense. It gives no value to the vehicle. You'd rather play anything else. And for that reason, I say no. This is the bottom of the list. Do not play the 4202. Please, for the sake of God, do not use the heat gun. It is a horrible, well, I wouldn't say it's a horrible gun. It just it adds no value to the vehicle. This is probably our biggest gap between two guns on a vehicle, on the same vehicle. Like my 422 with the Hesh gun, great vehicle. And then having the heat gun, just switching the gun makes it a crap tank to me. Yeah, that is a huge difference. But yeah, I just don't see the purpose in running a heat gun on the 202. Definitely don't put it here. Now we have the S-Conk, arguably the best heavy tank in the game. I did list it as my first, and I'm going to keep it as that. It's going to go to greater than great. I don't think it is you know what? It's borderline overpowered. Its ability to go hull down, negate heat shells. Yes, you can shoot heat shells through the turret still, through that little tiny gap under the gun, and then surrounding the guns on the right and left side of the gun. You can still shoot heat through there and go through the turret. But most of the time, it's not going to work. It's going to get caught by the spaced armor on the turret, as well as the tank. I did discuss it in the video as well, in my previous video, that it has spaced armor on its upper plate as well, which also negates heat shells. So a lot of new players that end up using heat premium shells are going to look at the S-Conk and think, wow, that thing looks like butter, man. I'm going to shoot it with heat, and then wonder why it's getting absorbed and not penning. And it's because the tank is filled with spaced armor. Another great thing about the tank, great turret. Turret, what am I talking about? Great gun. You can obviously tell that it's very late, guys. I think it's like 1 in the morning or something crazy. But anyways, the S-Conk's gun, fantastic. It has premium APCR as well. Very nice shell to have. And then obviously it's not the most high alpha gun out there. I believe even the Type 71 has a higher alpha gun, if I'm not mistaken. But the S-Conk's alpha, not great, but its mix of great DPM, I think you can get it upwards of like 3k DPM, if not on 3k DPM on the dot. You can easily side scrape in this tank as well. Yes, it is a hull down orientated tank, but if you do have the choice to go hull down or and well, you have no choice but to go held down, it is not a bad environment for you. You can side scrape so easily because the tracks are so massive that it adds a lot of spaced armor. And a lot of people, if you do go in a side scraping position, you're going to bounce a lot of shells and you're going to be surprised. But yeah, the tank, absolutely formidable. I think it's better than any other heavy tank out there right now. And I would say it's borderline overpowered. We now have the Vickers Light. Arguably the worst light tank in the game. Unfortunately, I don't think it should be the worst light tank in the game. Wargaming did give this tank Hesh, which I guess cool. But I mean, I feel like the Hesh gun should have at least 400 alpha. If not higher, actually, like 450 alpha. It should be like if this low alpha AP gun for its standard rounds, and then for its Hesh gun, it should be this high alpha, like devastating shell that pens a lot of vehicles, but it just isn't. I mean, like, I'd rather play the 4202. 4202 might not have the mobility that the Vickers has, it might not have the camo rating, it might not have the accuracy, but I just feel like the 4202 has more oomph, it has more reason to be a Hesh gun than the Vickers gun has. I still think the Vickers should be one of the most, just after the T100, as the most camo of any tank in the game. I think it should be this invisible tank. And then I think it should still have its higher alpha with really good pen. But yeah, it just doesn't have that. And I think the Vickers having Hesh gun just ruined it because it just doesn't need that. It doesn't need to be a Hesh tank gun. I don't know why it is. But it's 10 degrees of gun depression just about is very useful. You can use this thing on a ridgeline and be pretty sneaky. But I definitely would say that this is one of the lowest recommended tanks. I'll put this above the Minnow, but I wouldn't put it nowhere higher than the STB. I feel like the STB and the Vickers are about the same in terms of like their capabilities and if I would recommend it. We now have the Concept 1B. It did get buffed in terms of its DPM, if I'm not mistaken, but it's always been this tank that I've also not really understood it. I don't really like heavy tanks that have low alpha. Heavy tanks should have a pretty reasonable alpha, no less than 400 in my opinion. Well, I wouldn't say no less than 400, but the Concept 1B, I feel like it just makes no sense to me, to be honest. Its alpha is annoying because, I mean, if you're going against medium tanks, sure, it's very helpful. Like the alpha compares to a lot of medium tanks, so you're not really feeling that deficit in alpha. So sure, why not? But it is also one of the most strongest tanks held down. It's not better than the Krongwagen, I'd say, but it is a very strong tank held down, and it has a lot of gun depression. Its gun is pretty accurate. It has decent pen. But when you do end up using your premium rounds on the Concept 1B, you'll end up doing like below 200 damage sometimes. I swear I've done 198 alpha shot one time in my life in the vehicle. It might not even reach that low of alpha. I might just be talking crap out of my bum, but I don't think the Concept 1B is a great tank, but I do think I'm going to put it in my great tank list because of its held down capabilities, and its mobility is not bad either. So I'm going to put it definitely not above the Chieftain Mark 6, definitely not above the 60 TP, but I will say that it's between the Batchat's guns for sure. Yeah, we're getting close. I'm surprised that this has taken so long. This has been an hour and a half already. My god, time has flown. We now have the M6Yo. Now, it's 120 alpha gun, which is the higher alpha gun I'm going to start with. This is a very fun tank to play, and it's one of the most deadly tanks, and you can rack up damage so easily, and for that reason, I'm immediately going to be putting it in the high recommended. I'm going to put it above the... Do I put it above the 215B? Honestly, I'm going to put it before the Krong. I'm going to move the Krong upwards above the 215B. And I'm going to say that the 460 alpha or so gun is so deadly. Doing 460 or 1000 damage just about in like 1.5 seconds, most deadly gun in the game. It's also one of the most annoying, but again, it's that two-shot playstyle, which a lot of tanks have. Almost every, I believe like almost half of these vehicles are two-shot playstyle tanks, which is kind of annoying. I wish Wargaming would try something new, but yeah, I guess it's one of the best two-shot games playstyle tanks you could play. Like if you're gonna play a two-shot gun, you're gonna play the M6Yo's gun because it's the most annoying and also most fun tank to play. Just dumping people in 1.5 seconds is crazy. And I do think that its armor is not reliable, because you can be easily HE'd on the side of the vehicle very easily. The turret is not the most strongest thing out there, and it has 2 massive hatches on the top that medium tanks can just butter straight through. But yeah, I do think it's a pretty good tank. I would put it way high there. If you don't have the vehicle, I would recommend getting it. And now the 3-shot gun, now we'll say that if you're running the 2-shot gun, you need to use reticle calibration, so that you can definitely ensure that you're hitting both shells. Otherwise, your DPM goes to nothing. And then with the 3-shot gun, I would recommend using the reload boost. But I will say that while it has better DPM than the 2-shot gun, it's definitely nowhere as fun as the 2-shot gun. It's definitely nowhere as deadly in a way. But the DPM on it is crazy. I would put it just before the Progetto 65 and above the 2-shot Foch gun. Actually, do I put it? I'm going to put it below the Foch gun, the 2-shot Foch gun. The M48 pattern. This tank used to be crazy, really good. But I've always liked the M60 better than it, and that's kind of going to give it away a bit. But I do think that the M48 is a recommendable tank for medium tank styles. You have a lot of gun depression, or not as much as the M60 obviously. The gun is pretty strong. You have really good turret armor, you got mobility, and it is very similar to the E50M where you can bully vehicles, but it's nothing like the E50M in its current state. I will say it's a great tank, but it's going to go to the bottom of my great list. And then the M60, it's basically the same tank as the M48 pattern with better revisions to its gun and mobility. And I will put it above the M48 pattern, but at the lowest of my grades. I do think they both are great vehicles. M48 pattern is borderline recommendable and great, where the M60 is definitely a great vehicle. I'll put the M60 above the Compan, if I'm going to be honest, and above the 4-shot batchat gun. But the 3-shot batchat gun. But I won't put it higher than this and you know what? I'll put it above the 4-shot. And then the M48 pattern at the bottom of the grade list. Okay, now moving on to the E3. We're getting there, guys. We're on our second last nation now. We're about to be finished. Hallelujah to some. So E3 is honestly a pretty crappy vehicle. It can be penned so easily nowadays. It doesn't have the armor it used to have. Most vehicles can pen the cheeks of it now very easily. It's a very slow tank. Its gun is unreliable at most. And yeah, it's just an annoying tank to play. Like it's boring as hell to play. And it's not the greatest in terms, it doesn't have that armor like it used to. It's no longer that like overpowered armored vehicle, the best in the game. And for that reason, I'm going to put it in recommendable, but very low on the recommended scale. I would arguably say that it's slightly better than the BZ75, but I'm not going to put it any higher than that. The tank definitely was great because of its armor that it had and that crazy mobility with the super speed boost. And yeah, nowadays just I don't find myself playing it. It's kind of annoying to play, but it can definitely be deadly. I won't take that away from it. It is very deadly on a ridgeline. We now have the E4, the E3's brother here. That is arguably better than the E3, but not a great tank. I would put this tank above the... Wait, how did that E100 get so high up there? What the hell? Anyways, I'm going to put the E4 above the YAG because I like the fact that this thing has a turret. I like that it is very similar to a heavy tank. It has high hit point pool now. But I do think that the gun is a bit unreliable most of the time, and the hatch is kind of similar to how it used to be back in the day. Most vehicles can pen straight through the hatch. It's not as troll as it used to be. Yeah, I would definitely put it above the YAG though, because it does have that turret. It has better mobility than the YAG, and I like having that mix of like a medium ground of having 600 alpha rather than a high alpha gun, because then you're not reloading as long as you usually are with the YAG in 183 for instance. So I definitely do like the E4, but not a great tank. It's definitely recommended though. We then have the E5, which is arguably a great vehicle. It's not overpowered like it used to be. I would like back in the day in E5 meta days, I'd put this like way up here, like literally first most broken tank in the game. But nowadays, like it's an okay tank. Doesn't have the turret armor it used to, so a lot of tanks can pen the turret like no problem. But it's still very deadly tank hull down. And I would arguably still say that the concept is better than the E5, but the E5's alpha increase is nicer than the concept 1B. I would say the concept 1B and the E5 are basically the same tank. A lot of people might get upset about that, me saying that, but yeah, I definitely said that the E5 and concept are basically the same tank, so they're going to go in the same position. T57, very annoying tank to deal with. If it shoots you, you're dumping 1,200 damage basically in like, what is it, 1.5 seconds? Yeah, it's, oh, no, 3 seconds I'd say, especially if you use the gun reload boost. So yeah, it's a very deadly tank, but I feel like in most scenarios its armor is absolutely useless. It used to be pretty troll, but now it's just useless. You can just get penned no problem. The mobility is not the greatest. The gun handling is pretty good. One of the best auto-loaded gun handlings that you could find for heavy tanks, but it's not a great vehicle. I wouldn't put it in great, but I would put it high up here along with the Krong. Yeah, I'll put it better than the Krong because the gun is very nice. You can dump up a lot of damage very easily, and I think if you have good enough support, it is a great vehicle, but I'm going to put it in recommended overall. Now we have the T95E6. This tank's been through quite a lot of nerfs. It is going to get PBR graphics pretty soon, which is pretty cool. It's nice. I do think it's in due time of PBR graphics, and it might make the armor a bit more better than it is. I don't think its hatch needed to be buffed. Like, why Wargaming? What are these miscellaneous hatch improvements? The E6 to me is a medium. It should be a heavium. It should excel as a heavium. Improving its hatch armor is not excelling it as a heavium. You're just basically giving it useless upgrades. It has a hatch. If you're going to add armor to the hatch, might as well just get rid of the hatch then. The whole point of a hatch is that it's a weak spot, and then you're giving it so much armor that it just negates what you're trying to get at it with this vehicle. And for that reason, like, I feel like it should just have an incredible gun and great mobility. It doesn't need anything else. And because it's not that what I just mentioned, I'm going to put it as a recommended tank to get. Arguably, it is a fantastic tank to have. I would say it's better than the WZ113 and BZ, but I won't say it's better than the E100 and further on. I would put it in this current position. Sheridan missile. It's a tank you can't use in regular games. I'm just going to immediately put it into the crap pile. Missiles were the most annoying thing in the game, and I'm glad they are no longer a part of the normal matchmaker. Sheridan, however, I am going to put as a great vehicle, and I'm going to put it up with higher than the... I'm going to put it higher than the 4-shot Bat Chat. I love the Sheridan. Fantastic tank. It does struggle to win a lot of different engagements, and I don't like what Wargaming did. Something that they did, just even slightly nerfing the gun's aiming time or something like that, made it this incredibly annoying and horrible gun handling nowadays. It's very annoying that it's this annoying because I've played the Sheridan a lot. I think I have upwards of like 1,000 games in it. And before you could snapshots no problem, and now I'm trying to do the same type of shots and it's just not happening. The shots are missing, they're going into the dirt, and I'm getting very upset. But it is still a very deadly tank because I love that sneak ability. Like, you poke a bush, do 500 damage to your enemy, back up, run away, use the mobility and that camo to go hide, and then do the same thing over again. It is a very rewarding tank. If you do hit the shells, if you do stay unhidden, you can win a lot of engagements just because of that. And I think it's one of the most fun tanks you can play, but I'm not going to put it higher than this position just because of it being fun. I do think it's a great vehicle, but I don't think it's better than a lot of the other vehicles above it and amongst it. We now have the XM66F, which arguably could have been the most broken vehicle in the game, but Wargaming chose to do certain things to it that makes it pretty... a tank that you don't necessarily want to play over a lot of other vehicles. And for that reason, like, it has great turret armor, yes, but you can still pen it on this like massive weak spot on the left side of the turret. It has like a little viewport that you can pen with almost any shell type. And then again, you want to also have great DPM, which the tank does have. It has a great gun and all, but it's just this clunky vehicle. It doesn't have a fully rotational turret, and for that reason, like, just overall, it just doesn't make sense to me compared to other tanks that you could play. I will say it is better than the Badger. I think it's the revised Badger. I think it is a better Badger, but I'm gonna say that I'm going to put it above the Minotauro, and yeah, I would think I would put it higher than the Minnow, to be honest. Because it is quite deadly in terms of its gun. You know what? I'm gonna put it above the FV, but no higher than that, because I feel like it can be very useful on a ridgeline still, and the DPM is still pretty good. But I feel like it's not as strong as it potentially could be, and like I think if they really decided to buff the tank in a certain way, it can definitely be overpowered worthy. But right now, in between the FE and the 114. Now we're on our last nation. This should take maybe 5 minutes now. Yeah, so we're moving on to the Russian tech tree now. The IS-4 in latest update having the super speed boost is a very deadly thing. And I feel like Wargaming is lost for words on what they want to do with this tank, because back in the day, crazy armored tank, best side scraping vehicle in the game, hands down. Now it's just like, then they went to making it a paper tank with a decent gun and great mobility, to now bringing back the armor and then mixing in the super speed boost so that it's somewhat still mobile. Or still is a very mobile tank with having decent armor. But like it just doesn't make sense to me. Wargaming is going back and forth with this vehicle. I'm not sure what they want to get at with it. I don't think they're at their final stage of having this tank cleared out and done, which any of these tanks are never going to reach that. But I do think it's a great tank. I'm going to put it in my great list. I'm going to put it above the 50B, but no higher than that. And a lot of people will argue with me with this because they do think that the tank is a great tank. But I feel like over like the E5 and stuff, I'm not putting the IS-4 above that. And the Panzer is still you know what? I will still not put it above the Panzer. I'm going to leave it there. That's where I'm going to currently put it. Yes, it is pretty strong, but I just don't think it's the tank it should be. It's nowhere near how overpowered it used to be. It doesn't have that same feeling where back in the days where you would reverse side scrape this tank and just be this quick, nimble vehicle with so much armor and a great gun. It's just not that anymore. I think it's trying to be what it used to be, but it's not quite getting there, if that makes sense. We have the IS-7, which arguably was always the most overpowered heavy you could ever play, if not high grade. But now Wargaming's kind of nerfed it, but I still think it's a fantastic tank to play. I would say it's high up there on the recommended list. Higher than the VK90. Yeah, I would definitely put this higher than the VK90. Mainly because it still has that mobility that it used to have. It did get nerfed, so it's not as good, but I think it still has it there. It still has that potential to get to those medium flanks and rush enemies. And it does have that great alpha, yes. It has that great armor on the turret and such. It is a bit paper now compared to like tanks that exist with premium AP, like the K91 or Type 71, sorry, is buttering straight through the IS-7. But arguably in the update that it is in, I don't put it any higher than this. Honestly, you know what, AMX M4 does need a bit of a revision here. I would definitely put the AMX M4 not above the concept, not above the E5, but just before the E5. I know that's a big jump compared to where it was, but I feel like the IS-7 is definitely still my most recommendable vehicle to new players, since it just overall is a very universal vehicle, and its mobility is great, its armor is great, its alpha is great, its DPM is great. Like everything is just, it's a very balanced vehicle, and it makes it pretty good and pretty easily a recommendable vehicle. And then, yeah, obviously I've jumped the M4 up like a huge amount of spaces, but I just kind of rethought it now. It is a very strong vehicle, but I won't put it above the really dominant hull-down vehicles. Now moving on to the 140, arguably one of the most funnest tanks and rewarding tanks to play back in the day. But Wargaming ruined everything about the vehicle, and its gun handling is nothing what it used to be. And I feel like the vehicle is just lacking a lot of what it used to have. And for that reason, I'd say no to getting it. I don't think you should get this tank. It's a paper vehicle, no gun depression. The DPM that maybe it should have doesn't have it anymore. The gun handling's not as great. And the mobility, while it is pretty decent, isn't, like, it's not a star of the tank. It's not what's giving this thing purpose. And for that reason, I'm going to say no to grinding it, because I don't see it having a purpose over a Leopard 1 or any other medium tank out there. We now have the Object 260, which is just another confusing vehicle. I feel like it's in between of what it wants to be. I do think that it is very similar to the IS-4. if not basically the same tank. The IS-4 is faster, so it still has that better mobility overall when you use the super speed boost. But the 260, it's just a very paper Russian vehicle, and it doesn't feel like it should be this paper. I feel like the turret should be impenetrable to all shells. I don't think it should be penned on the turret that easily. But then again, that might make it broken. I don't think it's a great tank. I wouldn't put this above the M48 pattern, but I do think it is better than the IS-7 in certain scenarios. And I might even put the VK90 above the IS-7 here, definitely, and then leave the Object 260 as a great vehicle. Actually, you know what? No. Object 260 is not going to be awarded great vehicle. It's going to be below the FE215B now that I rethink it, mainly because its armor is pretty useless. Its mobility should be better. It should be, if anything, it should be the mobility-orientated IS-4. IS-4 should get its armor back. It should get everything that was good about it. And the 260 should be this very dominant heavy just like the T95V6, which is way low on my list, isn't it? Where is it? There it is. Honestly, I'd say the T95V6 and the 260 are about the same tank. I'm going to put those, I'm going to drop it even more, guys. Yeah, I'm all over this list now. Another 263. The no gun depression YOLO wagon. Not the most enjoyable tank to play in pub games. I feel like, yes, it has one of the best DPM and best guns in the game, but especially as a tank destroyer and the alpha that it has, it's very unique in the way that it has so much DPM. But I don't really see the purpose of playing it when it has no gun depression, and its armor did get massively buffed. It is very annoying to deal with, especially if it's right up in your face, because you can't easily pen the engine deck as you once did. But I do think it is a recommendable tank, just because the gun is so nice. But overall, the tank overall is, I wouldn't, what am I saying? I'm going to put it above the SB2. But I'm not going to put it any higher than that. I do think even the E6 is a better choice than the 263, mainly because of it having no gun arc and no gun depression makes it very, it's not versatile at all. You're really dependent on the map you get given and the teams that you get. If the team goes to a hull down orientated position, you're going to be kind of useless because you're not going to use the gun correctly. And then if you're not using the gun flat ground, you're giving away a lot of your armor, and you're going to get it penned a lot more easier. So yeah, it's a very hard tank to play. It's not easy to play on many maps, and that's why I'm going to put it there. The Object 268 used to be a very unique tank, lots of armor, and then also this like cool angling where you had to completely face your enemy to get the full gist of the armor. But I feel like it's just this tank that's been left in the dust, and for a lot of good reasons, because you know what, like this tank has a lot of potential to be great, having the reactive armor. And I think if this vehicle had maybe a lesser alpha, like honestly the 268 with the 263's gun, and with extra like mobility, is arguably a better 263. But that might be a far fetch. I would say that this is less. I would say this is in the same position as the 263, if not higher. I would put it a little bit higher than the 263 because I do like the gun that the 268 has in a certain way. The alpha is nicer. But overall, yeah, the 268 is a bit of a hard one. Its armor is nothing what it used to be. It's a very weak vehicle in terms of its armor now. Almost like most medium tanks are pinning straight through the bottom plate. It's a lot like the Minnow nerf. Don't understand it. Honestly, you know what? I don't know, man. The 268 is also massive. The armor is definitely not nowhere close to the 268. I'm going to put this next to the Minnow. That might be a very harsh thing to do, but yeah, I definitely don't like it. Now, the 268 used to be one of the best tank destroyers in the game, and it is still like, even though it hasn't gotten the most buffs out of a lot of other tanks, it's still a very strong tank destroyer and a very capable tank destroyer. I would highly suggest it. But I wouldn't say it's a great tank, because the armor, I wish it still had the old armor that it used to have, because it almost was rewarding to learning how to angle it, where now, like, no matter what you do, you're going to get penned if you're not hiding. And I think what really makes this tank shine is being able to use bushes and then use that great pen and great alpha to just rack up damage. But I'm not going to put it above the two-shot Foch gun. And honestly, the Foch probably deserves higher rating, but I'm going to put it just before the Foch gun. I think it is a better tank than the E4 because you do have mobility and a better gun, arguably. But yeah, I think that's a good section to put the T68. I think that the armor should be what it used to be because it was rewarding to learn how to angle and play it correctly. Where now it's just no armor. It doesn't even make sense to even start angling it. But yeah, the Object 7772 was a meta tank, and it kind of got slight nerfs every now and then that made it a pretty mediocre tank to play. But I would say that it's up there with the IS-4. I think it is a great vehicle. It doesn't have as good of armor as the IS-4 per se, but I think the gun is so nice on the 777. And the mobility is really good too. Nothing like the IS-4, of course. But I do think this tank needs more accreditation. I think it should be higher regarded than it is right now. And I would say that it is a... You know what, I'm not going to put it above the VK90. I think the VK90 is a great tank, actually. I'm going to switch the M48 pattern to recommendable, and I'm going to put the VK90 up top here. I should probably doing the last revisions at the end of the video. And then I'm going to put the 777 above the IS-7, but I'm not going to put it in great. And I'm arguably going to put the VK90 higher up. And the Foch, how did the Foch 155 single shotgun get so low here? I know a lot of people would put the Foch in like overpowered. Honestly, I'm gonna put the Foch above the M4. Yeah, that's a good adjustment to make. I know I'm doing the adjustments now, but I should probably be doing them later on. But let's go over the 907 now. The 907 got pretty crappy nerfs, to be honest. This was one of the most rewarding tanks to get right. If you played it really well, it was a mix of a a T62A and an Object 140. So you had the great mobility that the 140 had. You had a mix of the armor that the T62A, and then you had the Leopard 1 style type of gun. So it was a mix of a lot of tanks, and it really made it this fun tank to play. And then also it having the it's the same ability the T100 has, where if you shoot an enemy, they get spotted for 20 seconds or something ridiculous, and they get spotted for longer, which is a very nice thing to have. But in today's like meta, in comparison to all the medium tanks that there is right now, I'm going to say it's a recommendable tank, but it's definitely below the Progetto 65, if not in the same position as the T65. Definitely higher than the other tanks like the Caro and WZ121, because the gun is still pretty decent. It is still reliable, but I don't think it doesn't have the shine that it used to have. Now the T100RT, fantastic tank. It is not broken, but it's really high up there. I think the T100 is definitely like arguably, yeah, I would put it alongside my FE4202, if not just below it. I don't think it's overpowered compared to like the WZ132 because it doesn't have the alpha that the 132 has. But mind you, the T100 has really good DPM. You know what? I don't feel like it is overpowered worthy though. I think, you know what, where it is now, compared to like if you had to negate all the heavy tanks and the tank destroyers, this would literally be my second greatest vehicle before overpowered. So I think it's reasonable to put the T100 there and move on. We now have the T22 medium, arguably the E50M equivalent for the Russian tech tree. It has tungsten now, great DPM, very deadly tank. YOLOing capabilities, arguably better than the E50M. But overall, the E50M having reactive armor, it gives you that heavy tank style of HP. But I'm definitely going to put it overpowered. I'm going to put it higher than the 132. It's definitely in line with the E50M. Everyone knows why. It has a lot of armor, it has great mobility, it has great DPM, especially now having tungsten. It's just a very deadly tank to play against, especially that it can side scrape very effectively. It used to be absolutely broken when it first came out, better side scraper than the IS-7, but yeah, it has been revised a bit and the gun is absolutely ludicrous. And now the T62A, I've never liked the T62A since it got its nerfs right after it was a reasonable tank to play. Like the T62A had the Leopard 1 equivalent gun for Russian vehicles. Maybe not quite exactly the same, but it was really high up there. But now it's just like Wargaming is confused what this tank really meant to play. They've given it all this armor and reduced the gun handling, where I don't think it needed the armor. Again, it's one of those situations where like the FE4202 didn't need the increase in armor and a reduction in its gun handling. The T62A needed to be this Leopard 1 equivalent. It needed to be the Russian Leopard 1 equivalent, where you had this fantastic gun, and the turret armor being incredibly good is great, but the hull does not need armor. Why give it armor? It should be this nimble tank, not as nimble as the 140 obviously, but it should be this accurate, very fun tank to play, and it just isn't that. I find it so unreliable. It can side scrape surprisingly good, and it allows you to do a lot of good things, but honestly, this is not a recommendable tank compared to a lot of tanks you could play. I would say, you know what, I'm considering putting the 907 lower than I have put it. I feel like it's not better than the SDB by that considerable amount, and I don't think it's much better than like the 121. So I'm going to move it down. I'm going to move the 121 higher up, arguably higher than the Caro and the TVP. I'm going to put the T62A with the STB. These two are arguably the same category right now. And you know what? Let's just do an overall review of my entire list. There was 74 tanks here, I think, if I looked at the number correctly. And that took us 2 hours to do. A very long video, but hopefully this kind of gives you the gist of how I think and how I'm placing these vehicles and why I'm placing them in their certain categories and why I suggest them to you and why I suggest some tanks to absolutely stay away from. And I just overall, I'm hoping that you kind of see my visualization on these vehicles and how I place them in their certain categories. So overall, I think I'm gonna just do a quick run over this. CS63 is the most overpowered, then Hori, E50M and T22 medium in the same category, WZ1321, and then Leopard 1 is the last in overpowered, just because of its armor and some lackluster things, but overall the gun's great on it. Yeah, that works out. Super Conqueror, my most broken and the greatest of greatest. Yeah, definitely would keep it there. Then the Type 71. Reno honestly can go in front of the Type 71 in a way, but I'm just gonna leave. You know what? Reno's gonna go in front of the Type 71. VZ's gonna stay there. So is the WZ. FE4202, great tank. I love it. I think I'm putting it really high up because of how much I love it, so I might be a bit biased. But I do honestly think it's a great tank. Not for everyone though. Definitely wouldn't suggest it to the new players. Chieftain Mach 6, yeah. That works. A lot of people are going to be upset with me about the M4 and the fuck. I can just believe it. I can hear it in my ears. I can see the comment section already. But yeah, I'm going to leave it like that. And honestly, AMX 50B is borderline just recommendable rather than great. Let's see here. M48 pattern, 777, Krong, M6. Yo, Progetto. Progetto can honestly go below the 2-shot. Fuck. 268, then obviously the 3-shot. M6 Yo, E4. Yeah, these are all. Yeah, I would definitely leave these all as they are. Here we go, yeah, and the nose, these are the tanks I recommend not getting at all. They are pretty bad. And then obviously the shit tanks, I've said the Sheridan doesn't really count, the missile at least. STR-VK is just bad, and then the 183 is also just bad, but it is very fun. So if I had to just go on the meter of it just being a fun tank, it will be like the greatest of being the funnest tank you can play. But yeah, it's gonna stay in that pile. But anyways, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully it was helpful to some. If it was, just let me know in the comment section below. And if you did enjoy this video, leaving a like and subscribing is the best way to let me know. And yeah, it means a lot to me. So anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you can leave a like and subscribe. It really helps me out and I greatly appreciate it. And with that being said, hopefully your shells hit their marks, and I'll check you in the next one. Goodbye.